Are we allowed to tell the name of
We're live.
You work at? Hi, everybody. We're live.
Always happens.
I always get caught with my pants down, as my dad would have said. I'm just like, hi, I'm, playing with my bread. Oh, we're on air. So anyway, hello, everybody. Welcome to Mighty Blaze. I'm Jenna Blum. I'm one of the co-founders of The Blaze, and today I am the lowly baking assistant. I'm here with our host, Rachel Lester, and our special guest, Louise Miller. We're so excited to have you here. Yay!
Thank you.
Yay!
Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, we're so excited to have you. We've been stalking you mercilessly for months to get you on the show. I'm like, I know where she lives. She's in Boston. I'm going to go find her. So for those of you who are returnees to The Blaze, thank you for joining us again on The Blaze Baking with Rach on a Saturday. Those of you who may be new to the show, Blaze is a team of 35 creative volunteers who are dedicated to helping writers connect with readers in the age of COVID and beyond. And if you like what you see here, please give us a like or a follow on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube. We are ubiquitous. Please sign up for our newsletter at www.mightyblaze.com so you have no FOMO. You will never have literary FOMO ever again if you sign up for our newsletter, because you'll be kept abreast of all of our fabulous events like today's. I'm going to introduce our host, Rach. For those of you who don't know Rach, she is the author of Life's Accessories, a Memoir and Fashion Guide. Her work has appeared in the Huffington Post, Glamour, Parenting, Modern Loss, Kveller, and several anthologies. Rach is a graduate of UPenn and the University of Michigan Business School. And in her previous life as a marketing professional, which you still are actually on Blaze, I should point out, she worked on the business side of Time Inc. on magazines, including InStyle, People, and Real Simple. When she's not writing, Rach can be found baking, of course. So take it away.
Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I love that intro. It's true. It's not my previous life. It's my current life, my future life. We're just talking about how life is changing now with the pandemic and people getting vaccinated. What's life going to be like? I feel like it's all mixing together. Just thinking about that. So we're so happy to have Louise here today. Like Jenna said, Jenna did stalk Louise a little bit to get her on the show, and there's nothing wrong with stalking a guest to get them on the show, especially when we're all friends. And I am so excited to meet Louise and to bake with her. As I was just saying, I had never made cream puffs before. I bake a lot, and I was a little intimidated, but I have to say they're really much easier than I thought, and they're such a treat. Everyone in my family was so excited about them, and I can't wait to show all of you guys how to make them with Louise, the expert behind the recipe. So I'm going to read Louise's official bio, and then we're going to get baking. So I'm going to put my glasses on to read because that's how I roll. So Louise Miller is a writer and pastry chef living in Boston, Massachusetts. Her debut novel, The City Baker's Guide to Country Living, which I will show here, which I loved, was selected as Indie Next Pick by the American Booksellers Association, a Library Reads pick by librarians across the U.S., and was shortlisted by the American Library Association's Reading List Council for Best Women's Fiction in 2017. Her second novel, I have visuals, The Late Bloomers Club, was a New England Society 2019 Book Awards finalist. In addition to baking and writing, Louise is an art school dropout, an amateur flower gardener, an old-time banjo player, an obsessive moviegoer, and a champion of old dogs. That is a great bio, and those are great interests. I love all of them. Yeah, so welcome, Louise.
Thank you so much. It's so fun to be here.
We're so
I'm very excited to talk cream puffs.
Yeah. So I'm just going to kind of get us going on baking, and then we can ask some questions and talk more and good things like that. I wash my hands as always. If you're baking at home, obviously wash your hands. If we've learned anything this year, wash your hands.
Great.
We preheated our oven to 425. I already preheated mine. So get that going. And the first step is going to be involving a stovetop. I have my medium-sized pot here ready to go. And we're just going to add to the pot a stick of butter, which is already cut up. I have it cut up, just a stick of butter, and a half a cup of milk and a half a cup of water. And we're going to get that all simmering and melting together. Right, Louise?
Yeah. And the trick is, the way I was taught was that the goal is to get the water boiling right when the butter melts. So you don't want to boil the water for too long, or you lose the proportion of water to flour. So I always play a little game with myself whenever I'm making choux paste. It's, like, can I get the temperature of the water just right so everything comes together at the perfect moment? It's not 100% necessary, but if you lean too much in one area or another, it can make a difference.
Got it. And I just went here to get my water. I remember you saying in your notes to me when I was emailing you, the recipe calls for the butter, the half a cup of water and the half a cup of milk. But you said if for some reason you don't have milk, you can just do all water, right?
Totally. Yeah, I oftentimes do all water, especially if I'm doing like a savory puff versus a sweet. I'll do all water. It makes no difference.
I'm actually going to put this up so my head doesn't get cut off, but you can, it's simmering, the butter's melting. I'm going to try to get to that special place where it starts to sort of simmer just as all the butter's melting.
Awesome. Louise, do you start with the butter? Is it cold? Because you have to cut it into chunks, right? So do you start with cold butter and then you put it, okay. And then is there a difference between the choux that you make with the milk and then make with the water? Because when I made them last night. Henry, my dog, was very, very excited to taste test with me. I was surprised that the puffs themselves, the pastry, the choux, is not very sweet. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to invent a recipe and put cheddar and chives in these. And I texted that to Louise and she's like, yeah, that's actually my favorite. You didn't invent that, but.
Yeah, so that's what gougères are, is a choux paste. That's why I love choux paste. I call it the magic of choux paste. So it's, depending on the filling, it becomes a completely different thing. So it's the cream puff choux paste is the exact same batter that you would make to make eclairs. And then if you added cheese to it, it's a gougère. And if you fill it with ice cream, it's a profiterole. So it's all the exact same stuff.
Oh my gosh. That makes so much sense to me. I'm like, oh, of course these taste like eclairs. Duh.
I'm going to fill some of these with ice cream later. I think
that's my favorite thing to do. Yeah. And it's a great fast dessert. If you have store-bought ice cream, you can put these together in like 15 minutes, and then it makes you look like you did a lot of work.
I'm definitely going to do that. You know what? I think I'm at that moment right now where the butter is melted. I'm going to show you, and it's just starting to simmer. I'm very proud of myself in front of Louise for doing this.
Beautiful.
Sort of hard to tell here. So this part of the process is sort of like tricky with timing. So as we're at this stage right now, then we're going to add to the pot the cup of flour and the half a teaspoon of salt. Is that right, Louise?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah.
And it's very quickly going to form into like a ball of dough.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so you can just, I always take it off the heat in this moment, and I just literally, nothing fancy, just toss the flour in and then stir it. Yeah, and then just stir it until it comes together.
No, Jenna, you're right. It's the dough is not sweet. I mean, you don't put any sugar in it.
That's right.
But it's amazing the way it tastes with the sweetness of the filling.
It is. And it's almost, in dessert-wise, it's almost always glazed, or it's got powdered sugar on top, and so it ends up balancing out just fine.
There's my dough, which is coming together beautifully.
It looks really good.
You'll be able to see it better. I'm going to put it in this part of the recipe is sort of quick. I'm going to put it now in my my electric mixer bowl, and all we do at this point is just add 4 eggs one at a time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's this part of it is, pretty quick, actually, I should say.
It is. It's fast and it's easy, and I love that it uses ingredients most everyone has in their house, so it doesn't take a lot of planning.
I love that. Yeah,
they are sort of like a magic trick. These profiteroles or cream puffs or whatever you want to call them, because you think, oh, they must be difficult to make because they puff up in this way. But even I can make them, and it literally took me 20 minutes to make them. And it was like, I find all of baking a little magic in this way. Like, oh, that's so beautiful. You need to smell
so good. It smells so good. I know. In fact, in the recipe you sent me when you're saying magic, I think the title of the recipe was The Magic of the Show. I'm mispronouncing it, even though I took French my whole life.
Choux puff.
The magic of the shoe puff. Yeah. So I'm going to put the electric mixer on. You'll still be able to hear us over it. We've tested this many times now. And I'm going to add 4 eggs. That's all I'm going to do. And it's kind of become a little shiny.
Yeah, it does get really nice and shiny. I'm like amusing myself calling it the shoe puff.
The shoe puff. I like the shoe puff.
Oh, there's my dog. But yes, but it is like a like sort of weirdly easy, impressive recipe to make, right? So all you do is add the eggs and then everything gets really shiny. And then the hardest part is, I think, what Rach is going to do next, which is when you try and form the puffs. Like I found that a bit challenging. Do you have tips and hacks for us?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. Well, I know Rach and I earlier were talking about piping versus scooping. And so if you have a little cookie scoop, that works just fine. And then you're not going to worry about them being different sizes. It can take a while to learn how to pipe them and have them all come out in the same family of sizes. You can get really like very large ones and really tiny ones. So scooping is totally fine. That's probably a great way to start.
So true confession, last night I was IMing Louise on Instagram because I was making these, and all of the little puffs that I made look like Peeps. Like the dough is very yellow, and I cut the tip off a baggie and I put the dough in the baggie, and then I was squirting out the dough through the tip, which is, I think, what you are supposed to do if you don't have a piping bag. And I was so impressed with myself because they were making sort of regular size little balls, but then they looked like Peeps. And I was like, Louise, are they supposed to look like this? Like they look a little peculiar. So what you were very kind to me. You're like, yeah, I'm not going to touch that one, Jenna, but.
So the trick to that is you don't have to worry when you're scooping or when you're piping to make them perfect. But what you want to do before you bake them is have a little dish of cold water. And I'll just literally just stick my fingers in the cold water and then I tap any imperfections. So if you have one that's really oblong, you can kind of tap it back into a ball. And any little, like a scoop will give you a little ridge. You can pat the ridge down. So you can make a kind of a perfect shape and surface before you bake with the cold water. And the water just keeps the dough from sticking to your hands.
Okay.
I have my water ready to go. I like doing that part. It reminded me of like an art project you would do in school when you were little, didn't it?
It's like, like working with clay.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
That's
it's very soothing.
Yeah.
I love that it doesn't have to be perfect. I love that moment where you can fix it before it's too late. It's very comforting.
Well, my dough is here and it's ready to go.
Beautiful.
It looks so beautiful.
Wow.
You can't mess this up. I mean, you really can't. It's just.
I could mess it up.
Jenna made a very fancy TikTok. I don't know if you guys saw on our social media channels, but her cream puffs looked amazing and her TikTok skills were very impressive. So
thank you. It was only my second ever TikTok, you guys. I need TikTok love, support, and encouragement because I'm very intimidated by TikTok. I'm like, I'm not Gen Z. I can't do it right. And then I'm like, oh, this is basically an Instagram story. It's just all the buttons are in different places, right? I don't know. Who knows? But it was fun. I had skipped the patting part because I was like, I'm just going to make Peep Puffs and see how they turned out. And I'll tell you how they turned out, which was, I probably shouldn't say this, but when I put them in the oven and I baked them, the little points on top of my puffs turned out to look like nipples. It was really terrifying because they browned on the top.
You had to perform a little surgery.
I did. I cut the nipples off all the puffs. It was traumatic. It was traumatic, but it was like I made little puff breasts, which at another time might actually be.
I was going to say that might be handy at one point or another.
Right. Like for Mardi Gras, you could have like profiterole breasts that I will make at that time. But anyway, for the show's purposes, I was like, maybe I'm just going to cut off all these little breasts. So you should definitely not skip the patting step. Louise is like, pat the nipples back down into the dough. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to pat the nipples. Pat them. So Rach, do better than me. Don't.
Yeah. All right. I think we're going to go through this process and you can watch me. I have the screen down so you can see how I do it. And once they're in the oven, we can talk more and ask Louise about her work as a pastry chef and as an author and all that cool stuff. So this part is a little bit intimidating, but I think I could do it. I mean, the dough itself is a little warm. So in Louise's directions, which are excellent, she said the balls should form in about a little bit bigger than a quarter size. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yep, that's right.
So that's my thing. I think I did
perfect.
That was perfect. That's the best I've ever done. Yeah.
Do you love that I'm saying perfect? Like I know what I'm talking about. I'm like, oh, that was perfect, Rach. I'm
the historical fiction novelist says that the cream puffs are perfect.
Right, the nippleectomy cream puff says. So, Louise, do you coat the little ice cream scoop with anything like water or oil to keep the dough from sticking? No, it's just
no. If I'm doing a really huge batch, I'll probably like wash it a couple times just to get the dough out of the creases. But usually, I can scoop. You know, a batch this size, I could scoop no problem without having to worry.
Oh, I should say too, you guys can obviously see this at home, and it said on our directions, but you should put them on a cookie sheet that's lined with parchment paper.
Yeah, parchment or a Silpat, something like that.
Something like that. I have to say, these are coming off rather easily because the dough is nice and warm. Is that probably right?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Usually it never works out like this on the show. I have to say, I've already made these at home 3 times. Can you believe that?
Oh, I love it.
Wow. And who is eating all of these?
I know, my family and friends. But I have to say that, and me. But like Louise said, when Louise first emailed me a few weeks ago with the directions, I had everything in my house. Like you said, it's like flour, water, milk, easy.
Yeah, it's really, really simple.
How big a batch of these do you make when you are at work? And can you tell our viewers where you work pre-pandemic?
Yeah. So I will go all the way up to 4 times this recipe, but I find that you lose a little, so I tend not to really like to, I'll maybe double the recipe and I'll feel comfortable. And it's so easy to put together. I'd rather do 2 or 3 batches of 2 cups of flour, versus a huge batch, because you tend to overmix it. It's just, it can just be fussy when you keep expanding the ratios. But so I am the pastry chef at the Union Club of Boston. It's a private club downtown Boston on Park Street, and I've been there for 19 years, which seems crazy. And I've been baking almost 30 years professionally, which also feels crazy. I think it's been 27 years. So yeah, it's
I was totally busted.
We saw you.
I know. No, it's not that sweet, so whatever. I can do it.
Sorry.
So here's what the puffs look like before they go in the oven. For the baking part, we're going to pay a little bit of attention. So you put them in the oven at 425 for 5 minutes, and then you flip it another 5 minutes, and then you put the temperature down to 375, and about 10 to 15 minutes. You said my oven, which I'm sure runs hot. After all these years, I finally figured that out. I just do 10 minutes. So it's really only a total of 20. It's really not that long.
Yeah, they bake really fast. And that's a great practice with any recipe, is to know your own oven, because ovens run the gamut of cool to hot. The only reason you're moving them at that beginning is just because you probably have a hot spot in your oven. And so you just want them to cook evenly. If you have a convection oven at home, this is a great place to use a fan. Because the fan will help them puff up more.
That's good. When we first were baking the cookies on the first episode with Cheryl Day, there was a big talk about convection versus non-convection. I mean, I do both, and but that is a really good tip. I can imagine. It's amazing if you put the light on in your oven to see how quickly they turn into these beautiful puffs. It's so cool to see. Yeah.
Fun. It's really, they really are magical to me. Like that, such simple ingredients can make these big puffy things. It's really fun.
Did you develop the recipe, Louise, for the club that you work at, or did you develop these at home, or?
No, almost exclusively at work. I don't, it's funny, during the pandemic, I did a lot of baking at home because I wasn't working that much, but yeah, in normal times, I do not bake very much at home. So everything is developed at work. And And that's really fun. It's a fun way to spend the day. But this is very, I mean, choux puff, you know, you'll find very little variation on the basic choux paste recipe. It's ancient and well loved, and it always works, and why ruin a good thing? So yeah, I think I have never seen a recipe that didn't use the exact same ratio of eggs, flour, water, and butter, and it's basically the whole thing. So there might be a little tinkering with, you know, water versus milk, or, you know, half and half, and there might be a little tinkering. You know, you can add cinnamon, or you could add espresso powder or a little cocoa, like that's doable. But other than that, it's like pie dough. It's like you get your recipe and then everything's like, you know, you're not going to change it.
And you could add cocoa to the cream filling too, and then it would be like a chocolate.
Yeah, delicious.
That sounds really good. Yeah.
You could do something savory. I'm going to try to make these and make like gougere with them, make them savory and put cheese and chives. And now when you make them in a savory way, do you add those ingredients to the dough, to the choux itself?
Yeah, so I will add the cheese at the very end. So after the eggs, you just fold in. For a recipe this size, it'd just be like half a cup of any cheese. And you can add herbs, and you can add, I've made some that were like Roquefort and walnuts. You can add like a couple of tablespoons. Really good.
I'm going to do this as hors d'oeuvres. I should have like a cream puff party where we just have cream puff or puff hors d'oeuvres and then cream puff for dessert. I would love it. Yeah.
Oh, that's a really fun idea, puff party. Yeah. And you can shape them, you can pipe them, and then if you have a big enough freezer, you can take the tray of piped puffs, freeze the raw dough, and then when it's frozen solid, put them in a Ziploc baggie, and then you can bake them right from frozen. So you can have, you know, so you can prep them and then bake them 5 minutes before your guests come, and they'll be fresh and delicious.
Oh my God, I'm never making any other thing for a party.
I know. I do this, by the way. Yeah, I get obsessed with things. Like I'll make the cookies for 4 weeks. Now this is going to be puffs.
No,
yeah, you're going to
never run out of flour, water, milk, and salt. That's what we'll be making.
And eggs. Did you ever try? Okay, so here's an obnoxious question from my strange healthy person widget, which looks like way back here somewhere. But does anybody ever try to make these without so many eggs, or just using egg whites? Because the recipe calls for 4 eggs, guys.
Yeah, the eggs are really the structure. So I don't think it would work without eggs. I'm sure there's some like incredible vegan baker out there that's figured it out using like aquafaba, but yeah, it's not me. So for me, it's kind of, the eggs are the power. It's like the thing driving the car here. So yeah, I can imagine. You could probably, if you wanted to experiment, you could maybe do half whole eggs, you know, 2 whole eggs and then 4 whites instead of additional 2 eggs. You could try it. I think that you'll end up with something that's a little less eggy and a little drier, like because you lose the fat of that yolk too, which is like makes it kind of luxurious.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever tried it with gluten-free flour? I know we have a lot of gluten-free people sometimes.
I have not, and again, it's such a structurally, like when the little bit that I've delved into gluten-free baking, I try to go towards recipes that aren't like super gluten dependent. So something like a brownie, you know, you're not trying to make it really puff up, but again, I'm sure someone's figured out a way, but I think that would be really challenging.
This is like a little pre-promotion, I guess, but we are having on a gluten-free baker on in August who wrote a book called Baked to Perfection. It's all gluten-free recipes.
Amazing.
So you can see what she has in there versus this kind of stuff. I'm going to flip the tray around.
So can we talk about why? Because I actually follow the directions to flip the tray. And normally I'm like the person, this is why all my stuff looks weird. Because I'm like, oh, do I really need to do that step? I don't really need to. Or I read a recipe and I skip a step by mistake. And then things taste okay, but look peculiar. So does the flipping, it was for the hot spot, but does it also help the puffs puff up? Or like you start at a higher temperature and then you go to lower. Does that also help with the puffery?
So it's the high temperature that's making the puffing happen. And it's basically like the water, it's steaming and it's rising that dough. So the high temperature makes that happen really fast, you know, and then bakes. And then when you lower the temperature, you're just drying it out a little. So it's not like super, super eggy inside. Although I kind of like them that way. The turning is really is just like almost everyone's oven has a spot. So if you just left it as is, like, you know, the ones in the back corner might get too brown and the ones in front might not brown enough. So I always think it's just good practice. I always do that with cookies, with anything that's small, that's baking, you know, relatively quickly. I always move it around.
So you don't do this with pies, because you're also like an incredibly good pie maker. We know this. You have like a special pie crust recipe. So, but you don't have to turn the pastry when you're making a pie?
No, pie I just shove in the oven and forget about it. It's in there for a long time.
I like that.
Yeah.
We've done pie on the show before, and we're going to do pie again. So it's interesting to see the differences.
I think we should have a bake-off. We should have Louise and Beth come on. We had Beth Howard on the show, and Beth scolded Rachel for handling the dough. So Rach actually is very brave to have another pie baker on, because Beth was like, "Stop handling your dough. We see you handling the dough, Rach." And Rach was like, "I
PTSD from that. I know." By the way, speaking of that, this is a question I wanted to ask you, because I do this too. And there was actually an article in the New York Times about this called Procrastinating, about writers who procrastinate from writing by baking. And I think that's why I maybe took on the role of hosting a baking show, because when I'm supposed to be doing other work like writing or marketing or other things like that, I'm like, let me just go in the kitchen and bake something. And I don't know, I do it a lot. So I'm wondering, with you as like a novelist and also a pastry chef, first of all, how do you manage your time between writing and then doing your pastry work? And do you procrastinate?
I don't exactly I kind of get paid to procrastinate. So what I do, you know,
that's a good gig.
I agree. I always think all writers should become bakers for work. So, so what I do is, on a normal flow of time, I bake, you know, usually like 6 or 7 until 2 in the afternoon, and then I write at a library that's around the corner from my job. So, so I spend, at the end of my writing session, when I'm at the library, I'll make a list of questions or a list of things I want to think about for, you know, the novel, like what the problems I'm trying to resolve. And I bring that list to my job. So in the morning, I make a list of like cookies and muffins and bake this pie, bake this cake. And then right next to that is just like, why is she doing this? What could happen then? I need to raise the tension of this. And I'll just read it periodically over the day, because there's so much of my job is like chopping apples or like peeling the stickers off a case of fruit, or, you know, scooping 100 cookies. Like I have a lot of time to think at work. So, so yeah, I try to use that time really well. So then when I go to the library, it's like, I'm not spacing out trying to make decisions. I'm just there to kind of like do the writing work. So yeah, they're really good companions. I understand.
Sounds like really perfect.
Yes, I get why people procrastinate, because I think it's.
Well, I find the same thing. I mean, sometimes I feel like it's part of my job too to bake, to prepare for these shows, but it gives my brain a break from the whatever thing I'm doing on my computer, and then I can go back and I bring the baked goods with me and I eat them as I type.
Yeah,
my computer has a lot of crumbs on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Mine's the same. But yeah, I think that, it's just like taking a shower or going running. Yes. I think like doing this like physical, methodical thing loosens your brain up. Yeah. And then in the end, you have a treat, which is really nice. So,
and maybe a new book. So we had an audience question. If you're working on a new novel, since you haven't been baking in the same pattern since the pandemic, are you able to bake at home and free up your mind in the same way? And what are you working on?
So I am working on a new novel. I've actually done the terrible thing of working on 2 novels, which is crazy. So I have like beginnings of 2 books and I go back and forth. The way I've dealt with, so pandemic writing for me, it's been some great times and some fallow times. And I have found I did not procrastinate or do much baking to free that up, but I really spent an extraordinary amount of the pandemic walking. And that's for me the same. I'm a evangelist about walking without headphones. Like I like to just go by myself, no distractions. I live really close to the Arnold Arboretum. So I have a great place to walk in nature. And so that's where I do my thinking, is usually while my feet are moving.
Awesome. And by the way, you guys, if you don't follow Louise yet on Instagram, you should, because I have been armchair walking with her at the Arboretum, and I can't always get across town to go, but it's so beautiful. And she always posts, in addition to photos of like food, which when you were working full time pre-pandemic, the food photos made me crazy because I was like licking the screen. I'm like, oh my God, that looks so good. But she still posts food photos, but also beautiful nature photos, you guys. So if you want to go feel soothed, like spend 5 minutes on Louise's Instagram.
Oh, that's so nice.
So lovely.
Trisha, our producer, sent us one this morning of these two birds looking out at the Boston skyline. That you took. And I love your handle too for social media. It's Louise the Baker, which
that's right.
So good. Yeah.
And easy to find. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a little goat next to your Twitter handle. It's like Louise the Baker with a little goat, which is because you love baby goats, right? You have
love baby goats.
Special for baby goats.
I do. Yeah.
Well, I love the cover. I mean, the cover to both your books, there is like, so the City Baker's Guide to Country Living. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful with the picture there, and also like in nature here with the Late Bloomers Club too. So well done. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I read these 2 books this week to prepare, in addition to making the shoe puffs. It's like the best thing. I feel like I'm living in your brain, and it's a really fun place to be. So
that's really nice. Thank you so much.
Back to where we are, just I know because we could probably sit and talk to you forever. The puffs, I put the oven down to 375. I can't wait to take them out and show you. They look so beautiful. I
can't wait to see them.
So I have like 9 minutes left on that. And while we're doing that, we're going to prepare the filling for today, which this filling is really simple and delicious. We're doing a cup of heavy cream, a 1/4 cup of confection sugar, and a teaspoon of vanilla, and just mix that all up. Like you whip heavy cream. And this, I will definitely take a lick too, for sure. So I'm going to add that in for those of you guys that are doing it at home. Ani's, obviously, if you have any questions for Louise, if you wanted to add cocoa, if you wanted to add cinnamon or something, I'm sure that would be great.
Yeah, we would like to know. So I would like to know, oops, sorry about that. I just put on the wrong thing. I would love to know, did you ever have a puff recipe that was a miserable failure, and then did you eat all of the failed puffs? Yes, I would.
I feel like I've had failures with everything I've made. I can usually tell though before they hit the oven that something is wrong. The batter doesn't feel right. Yeah. So I don't, a really funny thing is I can tell when a cake doesn't have sugar in the batter without tasting it. There's a quality to the batter that's really different. So I usually don't put those things in the oven. Like if I can't correct it in that moment, if the pastry is too thin and I know it won't hold its shape, I'll just put it in the trash and start over. So there's usually not a ton of mistakes that way to snack on. But yeah, there's always mistakes. And there's always I always make extra. So there's always snacks in the kitchen.
That's so smart to make the extra. I have maybe 1 in every 7 baking things I do is a terrible mistake. And you love baking when you're like, that dough is so beautiful. It's a beautiful dough, right? And you're looking at it just looking at it. But I have been making maple bacon shortbread to send out with advanced copies of my book to bribe people to give me good quotes. And I had this one batch. You're supposed to candy the bacon in maple syrup, and then you add it to a shortbread dough. And I thought, I'm going to make these extra bacony. So let's put in a couple of tablespoons of bacon grease. Really bad idea. The dough was very grainy and
greasy.
Shockingly, after I added grease, it was greasy.
Yeah.
But I don't have the discipline to throw it out because I'm like, damn it, I spent all day making this damn dough. I'm going to bake it anyway. And then, of course, it blobbed in my oven and made a giant bacon grease lake in my oven. So the pro tip here is, when something doesn't work as a dough, throw out the dough and start over. And don't eat all the dough, and don't add bacon grease to your dough because it doesn't turn out really.
I did that when we were making the brownies with Elisa Torrey from Magnolia. When I was prepping it that morning, I was just doing so many things at once. And I added everything to the brownie mix except for the flour.
Oh,
I was like, what? And I was going to try to budget, and no pun intended, and I dumped out the whole thing and started over again. So
yeah, it happens to everyone. It does. You do have to pay a certain amount of attention to what you're doing.
Deb Norkin, who we had an event with at one point at the BPL back in the day when like things were live, which they hopefully will be again. Deb wants to know, hi Deb, do your new books have food plots? Both of these books that you're working on simultaneously.
One really does, and one, it would be a stretch. So a little bit of both.
Do you love writing about food? Does it ever get old? Or are you just like, oh, it's dependable. It's a dependable love.
It's definitely dependable love. And I think it's a way, it's like an extra way of communicating things. Food can say so much about a person or a community. I think I would say I enjoy it, but if I ever didn't enjoy it, I'd stop. There's like, you never want to feel like you have to do something. But the plot of the book that I'm working on that has food in it, it's in it in a different way, and I'm really enjoying that. So as long as it feels fresh to me and it feels fun, then I'll do it.
I'm so intrigued. Sorry, Rach.
Sorry about the noise. It's almost done with the whipping cream, but we're in a working bakery here. I'm sure people have asked you this before. I'm just always curious. People ask me this too, but did you ever think about writing a cookbook or a baking book?
Oh my God, people ask me that all the time, but I have friends who have done that, and I know how much work it is, and there's like no way I'd ever want to do that.
Like the recipes and the photographs and
all of it, the design and having to develop the recipes for home, and then you have to hire people to test your recipes, so you're not just kind of going out.
We'll do it.
So I would have to have. I feel like there's so many great baking books out there. I'd have to have something I'd really, really want to share, something very specific that hasn't been shared before, and I've never felt that way, like that I've had something very specific, like a specific point of view. Whereas like my favorite book of this year so far has been Snacking Cakes. I don't know if either of you have this book. And the whole concept of this book is cakes you can bake. They're all in like an 8x8 pan. None of them require you to like soften butter. They're all cakes you can make in like one bowl and make really fast. And they're very informal, casual cakes, and these cakes are so delicious. Oh my God, you have to have her on. But every cake I've baked in this cookbook I've absolutely loved, and I felt like this was there was not another snacking cake book that I was aware of out there. It had this point of view. It had an experience that it wanted the reader to have, and I love those books. But so far no idea has ever come up for me where I felt like I am the expert of that. Right. I'm very much like, it's like being like there are like orthopedic surgeons, and then there's a general surgeon, and I'm very much like, there's wedding cake bakers, or there's gluten-free bakers, and then there's like, I consider myself very much like a general baker. And I'm so lucky because I have a job where I kind of do it all. I make wedding cakes, I make just muffins, I make chocolate chip cookies, and then I make plated desserts, and I kind of do everything in between. And I love that. I love being a general baker. I've definitely had jobs where I've had to make like the same chiffon cake every day, and I'm so grateful I don't have to do that. So it's much more creative and different. It's different all the time.
That's so interesting how you describe that. I love that. I feel like your book could be the general surgeon baker. Yeah.
You have a burnt maple. I've been trying to say this story. I'm like, because of Louise.
Oh yeah, it's in the book, the burnt maple
sugar cake. That is so good. Is it in Late Bloomers or is
Late Bloomers Club?
It's in Late Bloomers. Yeah.
That's super, super good. I would love, and I know this story, but like, it's the most inspiring.
I dog-eared the page because when I see a recipe come up in a novel, I'm like,
We have to make that in the fall and have Louise back to make that.
We're going to do that. I was going to say Louise can contribute one day to our Blaze baking cookbook that one day we will find the time to do.
Oh, nice. Fun.
Yeah, that's going to be on you, Rach. You get to do the Blaze baking.
Another thing to do.
Yeah, because you need that. So I would love for you to share with our audience your path to becoming a writer. Because we talked about this a little bit. It's like a pivot. I know this story. It's like one of my favorite stories of all time. I tell people about it all the time. So while we're looking at the beautiful puffs, oh my God,
look how beautiful those are.
Story.
Yes, I want to hear this story. I wish you guys could smell how good it smells in my kitchen right now. It smells so good.
Yeah, we need like a scratch and sniff function on our StreamYard. We're working on that. Okay, so please tell us story time. It's story time with Louise.
Story time.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's funny. I feel like I tell this story differently every time. So it's interesting that you have a version that you care about. I knew I wanted to be a writer when I was about 20, and I was in art school, and my favorite class in art school was English, and I was trying to like cram stories into all my visual art, and a friend, a good friend, was like, "You should be a writer." And it was one of those moments where I was like, "Oh my God, like, yes, that is what I want to do." And but I had absolutely no idea how to do that. So I left school, and I had actually signed up for my first creative writing class when my father passed away suddenly, and I had to drop out of the class. And and then life just took many turns. I started baking. Actually, I got my first job about 9 months after my dad died, and worked on that career, and did all the things you do in your 20s. And but the writing idea never left me. It was always the thing that I wanted to do, and the more I didn't do it, like the bigger it became. So it became this like, every 3 months I'd go to Brookline Booksmith and I'd buy all the new writing guides, and I'd never read them, and I'd never do the exercises. I had like the largest collection of like how to be a writer books on the planet. But I just felt terrified, to be honest. It was like this thing I really wanted so much, and felt the more I wanted it, the harder it seemed. I don't know what that paradox is about, but anyway, so I did a lot of not writing, and I did a lot of wanting to write. And then I had this year where I was 38, and my brother had cancer, and he was only 41, 42 at the time. And so I was watching him, at the very, sudden end of his life. And I was, my dog had cancer. And so my dog was, as Jenna knows, like he was just my heart. Like I loved this dog with my whole heart. And he had bone cancer. And the first vet told us like he had like 2 or 3 months left to live. And they actually were like, you should put him to sleep. And so we went to another vet, and my partner, like, thank God, insisted we get a second opinion. And that vet was like, well, if you remove the leg, you don't have to do further treatment, and he could live, like 4 to 6 months, I think it was. And so we did that. And so I spent this time, I figure like, okay, 4 to 6 months, I'll be able, I'll devote myself to him. I'll give him like the best life that I can during this short amount of time. So I did, all these things. Like when I would think about writing, I would think, oh, I don't have any money for classes. Like, oh, I don't have time to write. Like, oh, I had like a million excuses. And so as I was taking care of my dog, like I quit my second job. I like pared back the hours of my regular job. I never felt like I had money, but I somehow found money to have like an acupuncturist come to our house and give my dog acupuncture. So it's just that kind of thing where as I was taking care of him, I was really seeing like, oh, if you care about something, you find a way, right? You find the path. And so in the meantime, I had this like 100-pound, like 13-year-old 3-legged dog. And so I spent the majority of my free time taking him on walks around the neighborhood. And, it could take a long time to get around the block, especially towards the end. And so we spent a lot of time sitting in people's yards and just kind of hanging out. And so this was really I think I had a flip phone, but it was definitely a pre-smartphone for me. I don't know if they probably existed out in the world, but so I had just all of this time to kind of just space out and think when I was out taking care of Carver. And so it was on those walks that I first heard my first protagonist, Livy's voice. It was where I had the first idea of like, oh, wouldn't it be funny? What would happen if someone dropped a baked Alaska at work? Like, you know, it was like these little just bubbles of ideas came up while I had this kind of open space. And the idea of the book started to form. And so I promised myself at that point that when Carver died, I would devote the same time and resources to learning how to write. And so he ended up living for like a year and a half. So it was a lot more time than I thought. So I ended up, the book was kind of like a third written in my head when he actually did die. And he died in April, and I signed up for like my first adult ed creative writing class at Cambridge Adult Ed in August. And I wrote the first chapter of City Baker in that class. So it was just it was just this moment of being in a place in my life where I really just felt like, you know, time is precious, you know, life is short, and let's either just try this dream or let go of the dream. I was really tired of being in this in between place I had put myself in for, you know, like 18 years. So that's how I started. And then I just kept going from there.
I love that story so much. I mean, of course, I'm like a little bit predilect toward it, but I'm like, your dog gave you this great gift of time. When I first heard Louise tell that story, I had a very old dog who was about to enter that stage of already walking quite slowly, but he was about to enter that end game stage. And those months changed my life also. You have an excuse sometimes, I think, to step out of your regular life because of your love for another being. It sometimes changes your life in these very unexpected ways. And we're so glad that Carver pointed you into writing.
Yeah,
that's
very clarifying.
I love that story. Well, first of all, whenever I read a book, the first thing I do is read the acknowledgments. A lot of people do that, but I feel like I just got the way behind the scenes of the acknowledgments of why it happened, and having just read your books. And Jenna knows this, I could totally relate to it because I sort of first became a writer after losing my mom at a young age. So I love hearing these stories. And I've been listening to a book, actually an audio book, a collection of essays, and the author just read a whole chapter about losing her dog, but it was what she discovered about their life, obviously. And Jenna certainly knows this. We're so excited for Jenna's upcoming book in the fall for Woodrow on the Bench. I feel like Louise needs to be in there somehow with her story of how her dog, you know, affected her writing a life. It's so interesting.
I can't wait to read that book.
Actually, Louise, I'm going to send you an arc. I just realized that Louise told me when I was carrying my old dog around, he weighed about 85 pounds. He was a big old lab and wasn't mobile. And your dog wasn't mobile either, the slow walking thing. And she told me about this harness that I used to carry Woodrow around. So he was like my living Samsonite. Like I carried him like a suitcase up and down the stairs and across the street. And that thing saved me, and it prolonged his life. And I would not have had those life-changing months. Thank you, Anissa.
We all can't wait to read Woodrow.
Thank you. But I would not have had those life-changing months if it weren't for Louise, because I would not have been able to carry him, and I would have had to put him down, and he wasn't ready to go at that.
That's the thing. Someone told me I would know when it was time, and it was true. And I did not believe them in the moment. But yeah, that harness for us saved our lives, because we were living on the first floor, but there was like 6 steps down, and it was hard. So that was, I was so happy to be able to pass that on to someone, because it was so life-changing for us. It was such a huge help.
Mm-hmm. I love hearing the stories behind a writer's life. It's like my favorite part of it all.
Yeah. And Louise's story is so great. Oh my God, Fran, thank you.
You guys, I could talk about how everybody became a writer forever, but we have to stuff the puffs.
Oh, stuff the puff. Yeah, it's puff stuff time.
Okay. So I will show you guys. What did I do with my All right, there's so much going on here. So here are the puffs that came out of the oven. And you know what? They look pretty good, I would say.
Oh, they look beautiful.
So
Gorgeous.
these are still warm, and you have to, for those of you baking at home, you have to let them cool before you fill them. So, right, Louise? So I have
the heat will just melt the whipped cream.
I'm gonna have a lot of puffs. I tell you, for these, I think I'm gonna do ice cream later.
Right.
If anybody wants to stop by, message me.
You know, we all want to come to your house and do a road trip after these shows.
So we slice these in half. Now, Louise, do you slice them fully in half, or?
I do. I like to have a very high whipped cream ratio and put the top on like a little cap.
Okay, so I slice these full in half, and I'm just gonna, like with the spoon, put it. I mean, you could use a piping bag too, I guess.
I usually pipe, yeah. So if you have a star tip at home, you could kind of pipe a nice little wave and then up the top.
Since I'm not a real pastry chef, I'm going to use this. And they're not going to look as beautiful, but I'm still going to get the cream in there. And I know Jenna made some too. This is the best part.
I did, but I did not pipe on. I was like slogging the cream on with a spoon. Ooh, let's see. Rachel, you hold it up. Let's see.
So I mean, this is just one. I'm going to do them all. I'm going to eat these all afternoon.
Yeah, you are going to eat
I'm going to have to drop these off to my neighbor, to the usual people. Yeah.
Your neighbors know when you're doing the show now. My neighbors know.
Well,
like,
I think my local friends now go on Instagram to see the dates and then like try to make plans with me that night. So I'll bring them.
That's super smart.
Yeah. So I'm just going to do this as we go along. But I'm so excited that I know how to make these, and I will think of you all the time when we do make them. So are you developing new recipes a lot at work these days, or are you?
You know, I'm still only like, I'm 1 day a week at work. And so it's kind of, I mean, it's frustrating on a lot of levels, but I realize like I've been kind of baking my greatest hits because I don't have that time to make a ton of mistakes, which is really what you need when you're developing a recipe. I actually have a funny story about the burnt sugar cake that Jenna mentioned earlier from Late Bloomers Club, which was, I had never made a burnt sugar cake when I wrote it into my book. I had done some research and I was looking for like a traditional New England, Vermont cake to feature. And I wanted something that you wouldn't, get at the bakery every day. And I loved how it sounded, like burnt sugar cake. It sounded so delicious.
So good.
And so I added it in, and then I should have expected, I knew that my editor would like to include the recipe in the book. That didn't mean I did anything about it. And so one day, as we all know in publishing, I got an email like on a Monday that was just like, oh, we'd love to have the recipe. Could you give it to us by Friday? And I was like, okay, sure, no problem. So the next day, so I have a majority creative control at work. Like usually like 9 times out of 10, like clients will just say like Louise's choice, chef's choice on dessert. And so I went in the next day. I had 2 recipes for burnt sugar cake and I made them and I hated them. They were they were dry and they were really, really sweet. And I just was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So that week, everyone at work got burnt sugar cake. For like every party that I was allowed to choose the dessert, that's what they got. And so I developed the recipe very, very quickly. That week. And so by Friday I had a recipe I felt really proud of, but it took a lot of trial and error. So right now I haven't been doing too much developing, but my job has been having a lot of really fun like theme events around different, for Shakespeare's birthday, there was a Shakespeare era menu, and we're getting we're doing an Adriatic Sea themed dinner this week. And so each course is a different country. And so my country is Croatia, and I'm making this thing I've never made before, but it's I guess a very classic Croatian dessert. That's basically like, it's like a Boston cream pie, but with puff pastry instead of cake. So it's like a pastry cream sandwiched in between puff pastry.
Oh my God.
That's so funny that you said Shakespeare, because I feel like we've been living Shakespeare in our house because my daughter is reading she's in 9th grade. She's reading a lot of Shakespeare, and she just wrote this paper that she showed to me. So I feel like I'm going back and relearning Shakespeare again. So I've had that on the mind. It's funny that you brought that up. Yeah.
That's so fun. So so those are the fun challenges that are keeping me occupied at work, and they're really, really fun to work on those menus and to do the research and to come up with something.
We have time for one last question, I think, Jenna said.
Oh my gosh.
That's so beautiful.
So beautiful. I love your platter too, Rach. That looks really nice. Looks really good.
It makes everything look better when you put it on something pretty looking,
Oh, now you tell me. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine, right?
I mean, you can even like bring in takeout food and put it on a pretty platter, and it makes it look like you made it.
Nobody tells me these tips in
right. My mom used
to. I would be the person on Chopped who was getting chopped for presentation. Like everything would taste good, but it would look like dog food or something. It would be really weird. So I have a question, because I know that your work life has shifted over the course of the past year. And now we're opening up. We were talking about this a little bit in the green room. How do you want your life to be when you go back to work full time?
I think that one of the greatest gifts for me this time has been just time to be really quiet, and also time to be outdoors. It's really funny. I remember hearing Annie Dillard speak once, and she talked about the fact that no one ever noticed that every scene in Pilgrim of Tinker Creek happens in the late afternoon or at night. And she said, she was like, I can't believe no one noticed. She's like, but it's because I slept all day. And it's really funny. Like if you look at my Instagram right now, there's like, it's just weeks and weeks of, there's no pictures of indoors at all, which is a pretty, not entirely accurate, but it's an accurate portrayal of my mind, I think, if not my physical body. So I am not going to be so busy. I was thinking about, I used to go into work at 6, and then I'd go to the library and write for a few hours, and then I'd meet friends for dinner, and then we'd go to a book event, and then there'd be the cocktail party after, and then I'd get home at 11 at night, and then I'd get up again at 4. And I'm like, there's no part of me that's going to do that again. So I think just really being thoughtful about my free time and making sure that I have this time to be outside and to be quiet and not to let, fill every crack in the way I used to.
That's really lovely. I feel like in many ways you're like the Walt Whitman of pastry baking, and writing. Like your feeds on every social media are always like so not only respectful of nature, but like loving toward nature. There's this great benevolence that emanates from them. And I can only think like in like Water for Chocolate, when all of the recipes carry the emotions, like your pastries just must taste so deliciously benevolent because you have this great love of all of the things, I feel like.
Yeah, that's so nice. That's really
so
nice.
lovely. I love this. I'm going to go outside and take a walk after this.
I know, right? Eating your puffs.
With my puff. Right? Give the puffs to all the neighbors. Yeah.
Oh, so lovely.
This has been so nice.
It's been so fun. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to show you guys my strange little puffs with Jeanette.
Like, they look amazing.
Beautiful.
See how they look like peeps? See, they're like little puff peeps. They're
great. It was great hanging together. Before we go, I just want to tell you guys what we have coming up this week on The Blaze. Is that okay? Do we have a quick time?
Yeah.
Always a busy week. I know it's like the last week, or this week is the next week before Memorial Day, which is sort of like the unofficial start to summer. So tomorrow, is Anatomy of a Book Tour happening tomorrow, Jenna? No. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Debut Spotlight is on Monday. I'm like, forget I said that. Yeah. Debut Spotlight on Monday. We have Donnie Wilson. Forget what I said. Authors Love Bookstores. We have Ryan LaSala. Authors in Conversation. We have poetry. Yay poetry with Valhina Mord and Rick Barrett. And then Friday Frontliners with Caroline. We have Mary Alice Monroe. So awesome stuff going on. A little housekeeping note. Our next Blaze Baking with Rach is going to be June 19th. Again, not the last Saturday of June, but close. And we have a surprise guest coming up. So that's all I'm going to say for now. Tune in to Blaze social media, Blaze newsletter to find out all the information. And thank you so much, Louise, for coming. Thanks, Jenna, for being the best co-host. And Henry for enjoying the cream, his first cream ever.
Henry, thank you so much for inviting me. And also just thank you for all the work that you've done for authors. I really was so touched by the way you were supporting authors during that time. My heart just ached for all the people debuting, especially in the early times of pandemic. It was just, yeah. So anyway, so thank you for doing everything that you're doing. It's a wonderful, wonderful gift to all readers.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thank you for hosting us, Rach. As always,
We love it. It was great. Thank you guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.